Thank you for inviting me to celebrate the 74th anniversary of India's independence on the 15th of August. I'm honored. India as we see it today, what I call modern India, is a grand experiment envisioned by British evangelicals and implemented in India, although that part of history has been suppressed by our universities and historians. To begin with, I would like to quote Lord Thomas Babington Macaulay's speech in British Parliament in 1833. He was a Member of Parliament, Secretary of State for India, 1 year before he actually came to India as the law member of the Supreme Council to write Indian Penal Code, and of course the famous Minute on Education. But in 1833, that is 36 years before Mahatma Gandhi was born, Macaulay persuaded British Parliament that our policy in India should be to prepare India for freedom. This is what he says, and this is a quotation that many have forged, corrupted, and misled people of what he actually said, but the official versions of his lectures are available on Google, on the internet. He says, are we to keep the people of India ignorant in order that we may keep them submissive? Or do we think that we can give them knowledge, educate them, without awakening ambition? Or do we mean to awaken ambition for freedom and to provide it with no legitimate vent? Who will answer any of these questions in the affirmative? Yet one of them must be answered in the affirmative by every person who maintains that we ought permanently to exclude the natives from high office. I have no fears. The path of duty is plain before us, and it is also the path of wisdom, of national prosperity, of national honor. By good government, we may educate our subjects into a capacity for better government. So here is Lord Macaulay arguing before the Parliament in England as the Charter of East India Company is being renewed, that we must govern India in such a way that Indians become capable of governing themselves better and freely, and our subjects actually become our friends. His sister Hannah was married to a senior civil servant, Charles Trevelyan. Macaulay was a bachelor, so he lived with Trevelyan and Hannah. Sir Charles Trevelyan published in 1838 the philosophy on education for the people of India. Why are the British educating India? He writes, the existing connection between two such distant countries as England and India cannot in the nature of things be permanent. No effort of policy can prevent the natives from ultimately regaining their independence. But there are two ways of arriving at this point of India's independence. One of these is through the medium of revolution, that happened in 1857. The other is through reform, which is education. The revolution will end our relationship with India. Reforming India will cement a permanent alliance that India, when it does become independent, will remain a part of British Commonwealth. Now, I went to study political theory, political science in the University of Allahabad in 1967. Allahabad was the fourth university. The first three began as examination conducting university. Allahabad began as a teaching university. The two big forces behind it were John Muir and William Muir, the Muir brothers, and Allahabad was founded to educate people, prepare Indians in the spirit of what the philosophy of education that Charles Trevelyan had articulated, and that's what made Allahabad a center of political activism. 6 or 7 of the first 9 prime ministers of India, Pandit Nehru, Lal Bahadur Shastri, Indira Gandhi, VP Singh, Chandrasekhar, Rajiv Gandhi, etc., they all had their roots in Allahabad. Allahabad University was training more students to successfully compete in UPSC and the whole system of entry into civil services through fair competition on the basis of merit, not through bribes, not through connections, but through examination and merit. This was a system which Trevelyan and Macaulay instituted in India, began in India 6 months before Britain began to follow the same system of how to recruit senior civil servants. In the year 1000, that is 1,000 years after Christ, Mahmud of Ghazni started invading India, and between 1000 and 1031, he came at least 16 or 17 times to India, looting temples, because that's where the money was, and looting kings. So for over 30 years, he comes. Every time he comes from the Khyber Pass, no Indian ever built a great wall of India to block Khyber Pass, from making it impossible for these invaders to come. Because India was not a nation, there was no one the kings couldn't work together to defend themselves, defend their wealth. And that continued in 1191. Muhammad Ghori comes and fights with Prithviraj Chauhan, who is in Delhi, 1,000 kilometers from Khyber Pass or more. And Prithviraj Chauhan defeats Ghori, who goes back. But the Maharaja of Kannauj, who is first cousin of Prithviraj Chauhan, he invites Muhammad Ghori to come back and supports him so that Muhammad Ghori is able to defeat and kill Prithviraj Chauhan and then take over Delhi, which starts the Muslim empires in India for 700 years. But by the time of the British, 1739, Nadir Shah comes from Persia. Nadir Shah has 80,000 soldiers, and he's 2,000 kilometers away from his home turf. He has no supply system for his military. The Mughal Empire, Mahmud Shah, he has 200,000 soldiers, 8,000 horsemen, 1,500 elephants, and artillery which he had bought from British. But Nadir Shah wins, defeats him, takes over Delhi, and there is Katle-am in Delhi, which is legendary. But that shows that before the Battle of Plassey, 20 years before the Battle of Plassey, how weak India had already become. That nobody was willing to lay down his life and fight these invaders from outside to save India. The Marathas, the Sikhs, the Afghanis were already plundering the Mughal Empire. Mughal Empire had become that weak. So in 1857, when Battle of Plassey happens, the Nawab of Murshidabad, which is the capital of Bengal, he has 60,000 or so soldiers, including French artillery and French soldiers. Lord Clive, who comes from Madras to Calcutta and Murshidabad, he has just about 500 English soldiers and 2,000 or so South Indian mercenaries with artillery, which is no bigger than the artillery the Nawab of Murshidabad has, and he defeats because Mir Jafar is willing to be bribed and turn again against his own nephew, and etc. Nobody has a love for the Mughal Nawabs and the Mughal Empire, and then the British take over. So India had already been weakened for centuries, and the Mughal Empire had fragmented after Aurangzeb and had become so weak, and the British colonialism started. But how do you transform this nation which has become so weak, make it a great nation, strong nation? That's what these prophets of education and giving India rule of law, giving freedom, etc., they are talking about. So it is the impact of this objective that if we are to love our neighbors as ourselves, we must give to India as good a government as we can, and not only give to India a good government, but enable Indians to govern themselves even better than we can govern them. That was the goal. That is the Christian legacy of India, which unfortunately we have forgotten because we rely on secular historians who aren't going to do history honestly, to give credit to God, who had called Abraham that you follow me, I will bless you, I will make you a great nation, because through your offspring I want to make India a great nation.